the middle. We're now joined Stephen Johnson, Fort Worth Star-Telegram, covers TCU. Stephen, you know, last year was a magical year until the end against Georgia, but what a great run it was for the Frogs, and we talked to you many times along the way. When you look at them, as far as what are the expectations, losing a lot of players to the NFL, but they still have tremendous talent. Do you look at the number of close games they won and wonder if they could actually repeat that again?
To me, the biggest thing was I don't necessarily view last year as fluky. I mean, I think you guys touched on it. The Baylor game was really the only one to me where it kind of felt, I guess, quote unquote, magical. But even if, like you said, like they practiced the bazooka field goal, it actually took Baylor, I think, kind of mishandling the clock to even give TCU that opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
So they won some close games last year, and a lot of those games, they still led wire to wire. Like against Michigan, they led from the entire way. So either way, I think TCU was in good position. You know, my official prediction for them was to win 10 games, compete for a spot back in AT&T Stadium. And based on what I saw in training camp on both sides of the ball, I think TCU is one of the top teams in the Big 12.
Stephen, do you think that the Chandler Morris being the starter last year allows him to, even though he wasn't the starter when it came down to it, but winning that job allowed him to hit the ground running in a little bit different fashion than he would have been had it just played out that Max Duggan was the guy?
I suppose you could look at it like that. I mean, just going back to how last season unfolded, he was clearly the best quarterback during training camp. So, you know, obviously, the way things worked out, it worked out great for TCU, but not necessarily for him to get hurt in the third quarter, the first game of the year. But honestly, I think that time he had to kind of just had to watch Max, didn't really have a choice. It kind of helped him mature as both as a player and just as a person overall. And the team really responded just seeing the way he kind of handled everything. You know, they say technically you're not supposed to lose your job to injury in football, but hey, we also know it's about getting wins. So he's a coach's son, so he understood that. And I think he got a lot of respect from his teammates for just being a good teammate and not being selfish. So I think all those things allowed him to hit the ground running this year. And he's definitely one of the leaders of this team.
What is going to be, you think, the biggest differences that we noticed from a Chandler Morris and Kendall Briles led offense versus a lot of what we saw last year with Max Duggan and Garrett Riley?
Well, the pace of the offense is going to be a lot faster this year. Arkansas, where Kendall was at last year, I would want to say it was top 10 in plays per game. TCU under Garrett Riley was closer to maybe middle of the pack. So we're going to see a lot more tempo. I think the offense in general will just be creative is the word I'm thinking of, and that's not to say, obviously, you know, the offense wasn't explosive and great last year. I think because they don't have a Kendrick Miller or Quentin Johnston, Kendall Briles has had to kind of be a little more experimental with some of the ways he's gotten the ball to his playmakers. So I think the offense will be a lot faster, and I think in terms of just as a player, I think Chandler will get the ball out of his hands a lot quicker on average than probably Max will. I think he'll still take his fair share of big shots down the field as well, too. But I think this offense really fits Chandler well, and he looks like he's really comfortable in it.
It's hard to replace guys when they leave, but that's also a part of building the program, that when others move on, then you have somebody else or maybe others in place. Who replaces Quentin Johnston in the big play ability? Although at times last year, of course, he was also out.
I think it would be a committee approach, honestly. But when you actually look at their receiver room, they're deeper and probably more skilled than they were last year, where it was really just, you know, Quentin, Tay, Darius Davis, Savion Williams, and Jordan Hudson, who's now at SMU. Now TCU feels like they can go 8, 9, 10 deep at receiver. You know, they brought in a lot of Power 5 guys, Dalen Wright from Minnesota, Jack Best from LSU, Jalen Robinson, who was at Ole Miss and started UCF, and J.P. Richardson from Oklahoma State. He's a guy that I think will probably be TCU's leading receiver in catches and yards. So I think they rebuilt this receiver room, and now they got a room that, like I said, it doesn't have a first-round pick in it as of yet, but I think it's more versatile and deeper than it was a year ago.
What do you think about the running back position? They got eaten up there too. I mean, you know, Kendry Miller's gone, Mercado's gone. I mean, that was maybe a little bit underrated depth wise when it came out, because you're looking at all the receivers and the big plays they were making.
I don't think the run game will be as potent as it was a year ago, just because you also have to remember Max was just such a great runner, and you always have to respect his ability as a rusher. Chandler can move as well too, but he's more of a guy that Max will lower his shoulder, run through you. I think Chandler's more of a guy that's going to escape pressure, pick up those first downs, but he's mainly kind of extending the play to kind of find the receivers down the field. So, but their running back overall, I think they're in a good spot. Imani Baylor, I think he's going to be the starter. He was a guy, I know it was a small sample size. I want to say he averaged 8 yards per carry last year. And he got to sit behind Kendra and Amari DeMarcado. And he had his moments when he got in the game. So it's going to be him and Alabama transfer Trey Sanders, another guy that I think will be part of that rotation. So it just won't be as potent as last year just because Kendra and Max is just so good. But I think Imani Baylor has the potential to be a 1,000-yard rusher too.
That was a very good offensive line last year, Stephen. As you know, a lot of experience, and they lose a little bit, but there's also some guys coming back. What's been sort of the progress report on what to expect up front?
Well, right now, the offensive line seems settled, but I think before that kind of shut down training camp, the biggest question mark they had was who's going to be the starting center. You have either John Land or Colton Deary, a transfer they brought in from Maryland. So I think that's really, the only really question about them. Other than that, you bring back 2 starters from last year, Brandon Coleman and Andrew Coker. I think the staff wants to play both of those guys on the left side, and if you do, you got 2 guys with over 1,000 snaps that started, I want to say, all 15 games last year. So I think that could be a potent lineup. Then at right side, you have Mike Nichols. They brought in Jackson State transfer Willis Patrick. So I think right now they're pretty much settled with their first 4, and then whoever doesn't win the job at center is probably the first guy off the bench. But another name to know is Ben Taylor Whitfield from Duncanville. He's a freshman offensive tackle that's already kind of broken into the 2 deep. So I think TCU likes his depth, but I think they're still kind of trying to figure out who's going to be the center and, of course, the final combination. Do we keep Coker and Coleman together on the left side, or do we put Coleman back at left tackle and Coker back at right tackle?
What is or how much of hype is there this week with Deion coming to town?
Oh, it's a bunch. And honestly, most of the hype, I would argue, is probably centered more so around Colorado. I think there are some people, that want to see how TCU looks, what they do after what happened against Georgia. But it seems like a lot of people are just really excited to see Deion's first game. A lot of people think it's going to be close. They could cover and things like that. Fox Big Noon Kickoff will be here. There's a lot of energy down here. And I think, like I said, TCU is eager to get back on the field as their final game. And now there's also coming on the national stage where if you really look across the slate on Saturday, it's a top game. I'm not sure there's a better game out right now. So all eyes will be on TCU, and I know they're looking forward to the moment.
Yeah, Stephen, don't you think it's a little bit funny, though, that you have a team that was in the national championship game and honestly, especially when it comes to Big Noon Kickoff and all that, 90% of the talk will be about the other guy and a team that was 1-11.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, I guess it's just about, Deion, Coach Prime, star power. I was watching the ads that's kind of been running on Fox, and it was almost exclusively about Deion with maybe a small mention of TCU as a Big 12 powerhouse. So that just kind of goes to show you. And I think internally, TCU's saying all the right things publicly, but I think that's going to be kind of another factor that's kind of driving them. All the hype, all the chatter. They've been very vocal. They're very open with stuff they've been putting out online on YouTube and things like that. So I think TCU is very aware that many people are rooting for, trying to tune into Colorado. And I don't think they want to let Deion have this spectacular debut that everybody wants.
Stephen, we talked at the very beginning about, TCU and where they kind of are in that pecking order of who you would consider favorites. You obviously know all of the different, parts and components to the Big 12 this year, the schools that are on their way out, the schools that are on their way in. There's more coming next year. It just seems like it's going to be a crazy season. How have you kind of wrapped your head around expectations for just the league and what kind of excites you or what do you expect out of the league this year?
Well, I know I picked Texas to win, so I'm still trying to figure out, do I want to change my pick or am I going to regret it? So, look, man, with the talent they have, they bring back almost their entire offensive line. They have the best receiver room. This is Texas. They'll be fine at running back without Bijan. And then everything they bring back on defense, obviously it is literally now or never, but, with what Kansas State lost, with what TCU lost, Oklahoma's a question mark. Oklahoma State lost a lot of guys to the transfer portal. everything tells you if you just try to take out the bias, they should win it this year. But we've heard that before. So outside of Texas, I think Kansas State will still be really good this year. With that O-line, Will Howard, Treshaun Ward from Florida State, I think they're probably – I had them ranked a little bit higher ahead of TCU just because we know what Will Howard can do, and Chandler Morris is still a bit unproven. So my power rankings was Texas, Kansas State, TCU. I went Texas Tech at 4 and Oklahoma at 5. Those are the 5 teams I'm really expecting to contend. I think Oklahoma State is a team I didn't realize till recently, but I think they have it. No, that's Oklahoma. Oklahoma, one of those Oklahoma schools has a really advantageous schedule where they kind of
both of them do. I think.
Yeah, so both the Oklahoma schools, I think I was maybe sleeping on them early in the preseason until I realized and started looking at their schedule and was like, these guys can just win 8 or 9 games on their schedule alone. So I don't anticipate any of the new teams kind of contending early on. UCF should be decent, but I will go Texas, K-State, TCU, Tech. And then both the Oklahoma schools, or Oklahoma at 5.
Stephen, the 3 players who transferred in from Alabama, you mentioned Trey Sanders is originally out of Florida. JoJo Earl, DFW guy. Brockermeyer, DFW guy. Do they get any of those players or 3 Alabama players if they aren't as good as they were last year? And which of those 3 will have the biggest impact? You mentioned Sanders earlier.
I don't think they do. Maybe not all 3. Tommy Brockermeyer might have come just because he hadn't really cracked it too deep at Bama. He's from Fort Worth and things like that. But for all 3 of those guys to leave Alabama, have all this interest, I'm sure, from a bunch of Power 5 programs, and then come to TCU, I think that was a direct result of that national championship game run. But I think if I had to pick somebody, I would probably maybe go with Trey Sanders just because I think he's going to get his chances in the red zone to get a touchdown. JoJo is going to be the leading punt returner, so if he gets an opportunity, he can show his explosiveness. But I would probably go with Trey Sanders as the first Alabama transfer is going to make a big play on Saturday.
Stephen, thank you very much. It's been great to have you. When you arrived last year to cover TCU, what a heck of a year to do it. Thanks for your time. We'll talk to you down the road.
Yes, sir. Appreciate y'all.
Stephen Johnson, Fort Worth Star-Telegram, right there with us on 365 Sports.
Top 5 voice of any guest that we have on this.